Spain just confirmed another case from the MV Hondius cohort. So the independence count is up to 13. And at the same time, the U.S. is signaling it may cut the 42-day quarantine short. This is Hantavirus Watch. And today we've got two things moving the wrong way at once. More cases in Europe and a detention clock in Nebraska that may stop early.
New case in Spain, early release floated in the U.S. Are those actually connected, or did they just land on the same Monday by accident?
That's the tension we're working through, along with what the European Commission's May 2nd notification to 23 countries actually said about Andes transmission. This one's from the World Health Organization. Let's start with a number. The Independent is now putting the MV Hondius cluster at 13 total cases, and the Chronicle has confirmed a new Spanish case. That's the update behind the May 27th question about whether Spain's second case would move the total. It did. WHO-DON 600 is still the formal document, but 13 is the number today.
Spain is now the country publicly confirming cases at a pace nobody else is matching, which brings me right back to the European Commission's May 2nd notification to 9 EU EEA states. If the EC sent a complete passenger list that day, and AP later found gaps in contact tracing, those two facts do not sit together neatly. Which list did the EC actually have?
The other concrete development is the early release signal out of Nebraska. The Independent reports U.S. passengers may go home before the full 42 days. On May 25th, we noted that Andes virus isn't on the executive order disease list, so the legal basis for the quarantine was already thin. Now the question is whether this is an epidemiology call, or whether that statutory gap is doing the real work behind the scenes.
And I need that distinction stated plainly, because may soon go home is not the same thing as the incubation window cleared them. If Spain's monitored cohort just produced a new case, while other countries are shortening their windows, somebody needs to say whether the biology changed or the legal calendar ran out.
This one's from European Commission.
The Commission was notified on 2 May 2026 of a cluster of severe respiratory illness on MV Hondius, a Dutch-flagged wildlife expedition ship with passengers and crew from 23 countries, including 9 EU EEA countries. The virus has been identified as Andes Hantavirus, the only hantavirus that can be transmitted person to person, typically requiring close, prolonged contact. The risk to the EU EEA general population is very low.
The European Commission notification is now a named, dated, public document, May 2nd, through the EU Early Warning and Response System. With 9 EU EEA countries represented on MV Hondius, the virus identified as Andes Hantavirus, and the Commission itself saying in writing that this is the only hantavirus transmissible person to person. That's no longer an inference. That's the record.
May 2nd is the notification date. AP found tracing gaps weeks later. So the EC had a passenger list on May 2nd. I want to know whether it's the same list that later turned out to have holes in it, because those are very different problems.
The Health Security Committee was triggered by that May 2nd notice and met repeatedly, so the institutional machinery was moving. What the Commission document still doesn't settle is whether the list it got was complete, and that's exactly the gap Brian is pointing at.
And Spain just confirmed another case from that same cohort. 13 total now, per the Independent, while the U.S. is apparently thinking about sending its passengers home before day 42. One country's surveillance is still finding cases. Another is engineering an early exit. That contrast is doing a lot of work today.
The Chronicle writes,
The Spanish Ministry of Health confirmed on Tuesday that a new case of hantavirus has been identified in a patient recently disembarked from the cruise ship MV Hondius, marking a significant development in an ongoing outbreak that has already claimed 3 lives this month. The patient, currently receiving specialized care in a Madrid hospital, is the latest individual linked to the vessel, which has become the focal point of an international investigation into the transmission of the rare, rodent-borne pathogen.
Spain's Ministry of Health has confirmed a new Andes virus case, Hondius-linked, with the patient now receiving specialized care in a Madrid hospital. The Independent has the total at 13 flagged cases, and the Chronicle's confirmation today is the piece that moves that number from reported to officially sourced.
That's a second confirmed case out of Spain's monitored cohort. And I want to know where the rest of that group sits in the 42-day window right now. Because if Spain keeps finding new cases, monitored is carrying a lot of weight.
Worth keeping in view. The European Commission's May 2nd notification named 9 EU EEA countries and 23 countries of origin. Spain was working off that same list. So today's case either means the named list structure is catching positives, or there's still an exposure chain we haven't traced cleanly.
And that May 2nd list the EC received, AP documented weeks later that dozens of passengers walked off without contact tracing. If Spain got a gap-filled list on May 2nd and is still finding cases on June 1st, then the other 8 EU EEA countries got the same list, and we still don't know what they found after that.
From The Independent.
American passengers quarantining after exposure to a deadly outbreak of Hantavirus on a Dutch cruise ship could soon be able to go home. There have been 13 cases linked to the rare rodent-borne illness since the outbreak was first reported, including 3 deaths. None of the deceased were from the U.S. The U.S. also has no confirmed cases, and an American who reported experiencing symptoms has since tested negative. So has another passenger who initially tested faintly positive.
13 cases total, 3 deaths, and 0 confirmed American infections. That's the baseline from The Independent today. Now U.S. officials are signaling passengers in Nebraska and Georgia may be released not at day 42, but at the end of this month, which puts most of them closer to day 21.
Day 21 is not day 42. Those are not the same number. The Southern Nevada Health District is calling 21 days the critical period for symptom onset. Fine, that's a real epidemiological reference. But the outer bound on this strain is still 42, and somebody is choosing to split the difference before they get there.
Worth flagging the Nebraska contact tracing update here. Passengers who've tested negative may leave quarantine at the 21-day mark, and that's the decision now on the record. What I want to know is whether that's being driven by the epidemiology, or whether the thin legal authority we flagged on May 25th, Andes not being on the executive order disease list, is doing some of the work.
Because if the biology clearly said day 21 is safe, that would have been in the original quarantine order. It wasn't. A passenger tested faintly positive and then negative. That's not the cohort you confidently cut loose 2 weeks early unless something besides the virology is pushing the timeline.
If you like clear daily tracking of high-stakes risks, check out Musk v. Altman Daily. Daily court watch on Elon Musk's trial against Sam Altman, OpenAI, and Microsoft, covering testimony, exhibits, and the AGI governance fight. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts. We've put links to every story from today's briefing in the show notes, so if one item stood out, you can follow it there and read more. That's Hantavirus Watch for today. This is a Lantern podcast.